Welcome to the only place where real, raw, and vulnerable conversations happen with IFBB bikini pros to give you an inside look at their struggles, strategies, mindset, passions, and all of life beyond the stage. This podcast is made to inspire, motivate, and remind competitors and the average gym goer that even the most extreme lifestyles and elite athletes have their ups and downs. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Celeste Rains-Turk, and now it's time for the Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. Today's athlete has attributed bodybuilding to the trajectory of her entire life, from shrinking herself to be happy to building her dream body, finding her confidence, and leaving a toxic relationship, as well as finding her forever person. She was diagnosed recently with Superior Canal, I'm going to say this wrong, Dehiscence? Is that right?
Superior Canal Dehiscence Syndrome.
Thank you. I'm like looking at you like, uh-oh, I should ask for
Sorry.
that. This was during her 2024 prep for national shows, and then she had cranial surgery post-show. She has since learned how important it is to advocate for yourself and even more of the value of life. And as a posing coach through her company Center Stage Posing, she uses her own experiences to help others who are competing, gain confidence and control on stage. She competed in 10 shows, 7 being regional shows and 3 national shows before earning her pro card at the 2024 NPC Universe, going from the Sea of 16 to second place and, of course, IFBB Bikini Pro. Outside of bodybuilding, she is married to another bodybuilder, and she's a dog mom to 2 corgis, as well as working in sales for Red Bull distribution. Welcome to the show, CARLY Lamberts. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good. I'm so happy that you're here. And I mean, you're so accomplished. It's amazing. And you've had quite the journey. So let's just go straight into the question I ask everybody, which is there anything you do, think about, or maybe a ritual you have right before your heel hits the stage?
Oh my goodness, I've been waiting for years. I've been waiting for years to answer this question.
I love it. Every time you're backstage, you're like, I'm gonna answer that.
I know exactly how. So I'm big on being really present in the moment backstage because it's everything happens so quickly backstage and you get in the rush and the panic of everything and your heart rate starts spiking and the nerves start setting in. And I had a riding coach when I was probably 15 to tell me breathe in the good energy through your nose and breathe out all the nervous energy through your mouth. And so I'm big on breath work before you step on
Yeah.
stage and slowing your heart rate down. So I'm backstage focusing on breathing in all the positive feelings, breathing out all of the stress and the worry, and just thinking you've done all the work, you've done everything in this moment that you can possibly do before you step on stage. And now just slow that heart rate down and show them. I'm just thinking, show them all your hard work and just step out and go.
That's wonderful. That makes me wish, actually, that kind of gives me an idea, how cool would it be if this would be impossible probably, but if there was a way to monitor competitors' heart rates before going on stage and compare the different
Yeah.
pre-routines, because in sports psychology, we know that having a ritual or routine for performance supports performance and reduces anxiety levels. So the fact that you've experienced that for yourself and you've focused on breath work specifically to help you, I just think it would be really awesome to actually compare the differences and over time maybe even see the trajectory or the performance results of those athletes too.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's helped me a ton. If you think about it, if your heart rate is pounding out of your chest, you're gonna rush out really quickly.
Mm.
And then your whole routine's gonna be rushed. So I'm big on okay, slow the heart rate down, slow the mind down, and then take your first step out on stage. And you'll walk out with a nice consistent pace. And it kind of just sets the tone for the entire time you're on stage. And so that's why I've gotten so big into it. And that's why it's my favorite thing to do backstage.
That's
But
such a great point. Yeah, absolutely. Of course. And that makes perfect sense too. I think about whenever I think about what I do before I step on stage, I'm like, a lot of it is just to calm down.
Yeah.
Now, am I focusing specifically on my heart rate? No, but am I focusing on relaxing my body and like focusing on how does everything around me feel? Yes, because it's grounding, and as a result, grounding work would impact your heart rate, impact your stress level. And you as a posing coach probably see this a lot too. Like even in posing practice sessions, like I imagine you meet with someone for the first time and they're probably like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so nervous just to even pose in front of somebody."
Yeah, I literally just posed with someone yesterday and she was like, I'm so nervous. I'm like, it's just you and me. Like it's just you and me over FaceTime. Like I promise you it's not that scary. Like I promise I'm not judging you or anything. Like we're just here to see where you're at and keep moving forward.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm sure she appreciates that. It's such a good reminder though, like you can feel that anytime. So imagine if you feel that in your posing sessions, you'll definitely feel it on stage. So that speaks to like practice. And I'm sure you could speak on that more than I can, but what's your take on like practicing and preparing for a show when it comes to posing itself?
So I'm big on you can never add more practice in on the end. Everyone's trying to find that
Hmm.
magic number of sessions or practice to like length of time. I'm like, you get to the end and you can never add more on. Like you can never continue practicing on show day. Like you step on stage and that's it. Like you couldn't practice anymore. To look back at my practice and be like, I should have practiced more. I should have done more. Um, so I'm a big advocate for like starting early and honing in on all of the different aspects of stage because the routine is yes part of it, but you still have to understand on like how to move around on stage, how to hold your core in on stage and understand that like I've been to amateur shows where they're on stage for like 6, 8 minutes. It was nuts. I watched one that they were working them every single class. They had a novice, like a true novice class, walk to the back, and
Hmm.
I was like shook. I was like, I've never seen them
Was
ask
it
that.
competitive?
It was a decently competitive show. It was actually the Vikings championship in Utah. It was the one that my husband actually won the classic overall at this year. And they were working them every single class. They were
Wow.
up there for a long time. Like even the true novice class, the novice classes, they were up there for a really long time. So like understanding that yes, the majority of the time you may not be asked to like walk to the back. You may not be asked to be on stage for a long period of time, but there is a chance that you're going to be up there for a long time and you need to be ready for it. So I'm big on like listening to a show in the background while following along to the judges, like
Yes.
listening and like preparing that way, but also like practicing with different types of music because I've been on stage and I've you've had really like pump up music and then I've been on stage and it's been like elevator music. And if you're not prepared for that, like mentally, like if you have songs that cheer you up and like get you
Mhm.
going and get you in the mood to pose, that's great. But you also need to be able to pose with just about anything because you never know what's going to be on stage when you hop
So
on.
true. I can say that I do not recall any song that was ever playing when I've been on
That's
stage because
good.
I feel like I'm just like everything around me goes and
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just up there posing, but then I'll watch the video back and I'm like, that was a weird
That's
song or oh, that was a good one. I'm glad they
yeah.
played that.
Mhm.
So anyway, I think those are great tips. And oftentimes I think show presence gets overlooked for the amateur athlete in particular because there are so many other new things happening when you're in preparation for a competition for the very first time. Yes, you think about posing, but it's probably not something you place as much priority on, but you hear on podcasts like this, oh, you need to be practicing your posing early, you need to be, but that can sometimes feel stressful. So, what are some of the keys to posing that often go overlooked by amateur athletes that you think would make a big difference in their debut on stage?
So investing in a posing coach, a good posing coach, because you can watch videos online, but Routine should never be duplicated. Like if you're looking at your favorite pro or your favorite national level competitor or just an NPC level competitor, if you're looking at one of your favorite athletes on stage and trying to mimic their routine, it's never going to have the same effect because everyone's body, everyone's shape, everyone's structure is so vastly different that if you're trying to mimic somebody else with a different structure, it's just never going to warrant the same result. So like it's great to like look and like find maybe a little bits and pieces out of someone else's routine, but have someone there that can like steer you in the right direction of like, hey, maybe like adding in a whole bunch. I'm a big advocate for like at an NPC level, like keep it sweet, keep it simple, make sure it fits your personality and get off the stage. Like Sandy says, show me your front, show me your back, and get off the stage.
Hmm.
And that way, like you can have a really clean, successful routine and not just put something on stage that is really fun, but really in reality isn't showing you your best angles. So I'm really big on that. Another tip would just be being consistent with it. Like make sure you're practicing on a regular basis. Like whenever I take check-in photos, I would also practice at the same time. Like you're already in your suit and heels. You're not having to like fight to get yourself into those things. Post-workout when you're tired, like practicing when you're tired, like leg day, practicing after leg day. It's rough. Don't get me wrong, it's rough. But like never have you ever is your like core been so tired and your
Yeah.
legs are shaking. And I'm like, great, this mimics stage so well because oftentimes people's legs are shaking, your core is exhausted, and you've been on your feet all day, even if you shouldn't have. You've been on your feet all day,
Hmm.
and now you're trying to pose and you're cramping. Like, you gotta be able to pose through some of these things. So those are some of the like things I think of, anyways.
That's so good. Yeah, that I wish I could go back and tell the first show version of myself to do that because I practiced a lot, but I was practicing, I think, a lot of the wrong things and also the wrong timing. It would have been really good to practice. It wasn't until like my second season I was like, okay, practicing after a workout would be good, not just before it. It's like there's a reason it's tiring. And then the endurance thing you mentioned earlier, and just to stress the importance of that, like when you're being on stage for 8 minutes or so, yeah, your core starts to lose control, but also your lower back gets so tight. Like after show days, and even no matter how often I practice, after a show day, my lower back is so sore.
Yes.
Um, it never has like no matter how if I've practiced every single day from improvement season all the way through a prep, no matter what after show day, my lower back is sore. So do you have any recommendations for that? Like what if someone is like, I'm trying to pose more often, trying to practice more, but like I can't get past this soreness.
So shorter, more is sometimes better because people try to practice for like if you're practicing for an hour and your body's not really hurting, I would love to know what you're doing. Would love to
Yeah,
know what you're doing. Because I can't even do that.
right.
And I take clients like all day, like a lot, a
Mhm.
lot. Um, but for like me for practice, shorter sessions, more of them. So like keep it at 10 minutes, 15 minutes cap. And just add in more throughout the day. So do one morning, mid, late after or in the evening. But flexibility stuff is huge for me. Like if you are not flexible enough, you're always going to be in pain. Like super comfortable. There's always a little bit of like a forced aspect of it, but the the beauty is in making it a little less painful and making it look flawless on stage, and part of that is flexibility. So I'm
Mhm.
huge on like any sort of exercises that open up the back, help relieve tension in the low back, the glutes, the hips, all of those items as well. Hamstrings, because people neglect stretching there, and then they realize like, why can't I arch my back? I'm like, you're tight in so many areas. It's not just one.
Mm.
There's no magical fix for it, but just finding areas that people are struggling in and then like implementing flexibility stuff in those areas to help them actually be able to like there's hitting your poses and then there's like maximizing every pose.
Mm.
And flexibility to me is like the bridge to get you to that next level for posing. So yeah, for me
Did
that's that and probably some Epsom salt baths. That helps.
That's good advice. Actually, I just recently bought a bag of Epsom salt. I was like, you're gonna use this. And I still have it. I'm like, Celeste, get
You'll
it
get to the point
together.
and you'll be like, oh. You'll be like, I need it. And you'll hop in and you'll just be like, oh, I love roasting myself, absolutely roasting
Literally.
myself in an Epsom salt
Literally.
bath. There's nothing better when you're sore.
Right? Yeah, like I want to sweat a little bit, you
Yes.
know?
Mhm. Like a sauna, but with a
But
lot more
wet.
power.
Yeah. So, let's talk about your own personal experiences now. So, you had started in 2019 and you really didn't take it, you didn't take a lot of time off between shows until you placed 16th at USA's, and you called that a humbling experience when you reflected on that in some posts. So, walk us through what you did during that time off to be able to come back and win an overall, and then obviously win your pro card. But maybe we could talk even, or you could touch even a little bit on why you kept going back to the stage. Was there an escape? Was there a feeling like it would keep your lifestyle in check? Was it for mental health? Like, why didn't you take time off sooner? And then what happened when you did, if you're willing to answer those?
Yeah, yeah. So initially, like before getting into competing and my first few years of competing, I was in a really bad relationship, like very toxic, narcissistic relationship. And I was using, when I first started working out, like I was trying to just shrink myself. I was 5'7", I got all the way down to like 112 pounds, which is nothing, nothing for me.
No way. Yeah.
Um, like I'd never been big growing up. I'd always been like, I think at my heaviest when I was in college, I was probably like 116, so still not that big. But to shrink down that much and already be a small person to begin with, it was a lot, like very, very tiny, very thin. And part of the reason for trying to shrink myself was to make the other person happy, feeling like I didn't like my body and was trying to find ways to like my body. So it's like do what everyone does at that point in time. Like, okay, I'll just get smaller. I'll just get smaller. So I became a cardio bunny and just on my elliptical in the gym in my hoodie and just hiding my body however I could and just trying to be happy in that aspect.
Mm.
So I shrunk myself and realized I hated myself more than ever. Like I was looking at myself and I'm just like, I had a defined core, but everything else was just like skin and bones. And I'm looking at myself and I'm like, I've never hated myself more than in this moment right now.
Wow.
So at that point, Instagram, like lifestyle fitness and like fitfluencers had really gotten popular at that point. And so I was looking at these girls and I'm like, my goodness, they look so amazing. And like they're showing their before photos and like I'm seeing girls that had no butt.
Hmm.
Like I had no butt. My back went straight into my legs. Um, I was seeing that and I was seeing these girls like just transform their bodies and I was like, oh my goodness, like
Hmm.
you can do that? Like that's a thing?
Right.
And so I got off my elliptical and just running myself into the ground and started lifting. And when I started lifting, I got those newbie gains really quickly. So I was like so excited, so
Love
excited. I
it.
started having a little bit of a butt and I was just like, yes,
That's
yes.
awesome.
And I got into like the lifestyle things for quite a bit. I want to say for 2, 3 years, I just did kind of the lifestyle side of things.
Mm.
And for 2 years straight, I remember I lifted the same weights, did not increase in weight because my diet just did not match the
Okay.
level of effort. So like I had no idea how to properly like feed myself to actually continue to grow. So the initial gains came quickly and then I plateaued and just hit up and just stayed. Um, so at the point I was getting ready to like I got really tired of the lifestyle side of things.
Yeah.
And I was working in a restaurant and one of my coworkers, I was actually prepping for a figure show. She was
Hmm.
prepping for a figure. And I remember seeing her arms and being like, oh my God, her arms look amazing. And like even more so than the lifestyle side of things. And then I was seeing her come to work every day with her meals prepped and like eating her chicken and rice and broccoli and then eventually just chicken and broccoli. And I was just like some almonds and I was like, girl, this girl is really dedicated. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and I remember watching her compete and seeing her stage shots. She brought them to work afterwards because I kept asking her updates for prep and everything like that because I was excited for her. And watching her stage shots, and I saw that and I was just like, oh my God, she looks amazing. Like her shape was great. Like she had really great structure. And I was just like, that's just amazing. And so I remember just like that kind of like planted the seed. And I was already using the gym as kind of like escape from my personal life. And it was like my one time during the day that I could just be 100%. I didn't talk. I was never like a talk to the per people at the gym. I was always like headphones on, just escape the world for a little bit.
Mhm.
And I remember that just kind of like planted the seed. And then I started following bikini girls because personally I liked their look a lot. And so I just kept following different bikini girls and on Instagram and just kept spiraling from there. And then eventually I decided I was like, I'm gonna try and prep. And so like I attempted to prep myself once, laughably, horribly wrong. Did not even make it. I had a couple of weeks and I realized I knew nothing. I'm like, okay, like no idea what's going on. So I did exactly what you shouldn't do when it comes to looking for a coach and found the first person that I knew of that did a couple shows and decided she was a prep coach and hopped on with her and prepped for my first show in 16 weeks. And I went from like no diet structure at all. Like, don't do that. Don't go into a prep with no diet structure. So, like,
Right.
the sugar withdrawals that I came off of were nuts. I went
Yeah.
from like a really strict meal plan, but it was the first time I realized how much I was under eating as far as like protein went,
Mhm.
especially. So, first prep, 16 weeks, and I remember stepping on stage, and I'm a very shy person, especially like when I first got into it. Like, my life was very like my family didn't understand why I was doing it. He really wasn't supportive of it. He just kept referring to as when are you going to be done with this prep thing? Like
Mm.
diet thing, like when are you going to be done? And so when I stepped on stage, it was like this mask just slid over my face and I was like the most confident person. Like my posing was atrocious, but
Mhm.
I was very confident. I was very
I
confident
love
on
it.
stage. And I stepped off stage and for me it was just like, holy smokes, who was that person? And how do I become more like her every
Wow.
day? So like I loved that feeling of like the
Hmm.
stepping on stage and just feeling so incredibly confident in my body and like my presentation and everything. And I didn't like have I thought I was gonna have like the shakes and the nerves. And mind you, I did have a little bit of the shakes and the nerves, but it was more of like that, like just feeling of like the alter ego just sliding into place. And
Mhm.
she just took over and she did her thing on stage. And when we stepped off, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I was born to do this.
Wow.
And so I kept going. I got hooked and I did that one and another one in the same year. Um, and then yeah, I just kept taking these little short ones. My problem was I didn't understand at that point what a reverse actually should look like
Yeah.
properly. My first coach wasn't structuring it really well. She was just kind of like, "Oh, you're done with prep," and I would just come back to her after however many weeks of an improvement season and be like, "Hey, I'm ready to prep again because I'm uncomfortable because I don't really know how to control this."
Exactly.
Yeah. So the main reason was I just it was like my escape and I was just like, okay, this I love who that person is. Not even so much like the competition side. That was a blast, but just the person I was on stage, I was like I was trying to become her in my everyday life. Um,
Mhm.
and just try and get her to like rub off on all the other areas of my life. So yeah, I
Wow.
kept going.
Wow. And then when you finally hit the national stage, you were unhappy with the result. So what had to change between 2021 and 2024 to win your pro card?
Yeah, so for me, it was kind of like it was a very eye-opening experience. I remember being backstage in 2021 and looking around at all these girls, and you see them online, but like seeing them in person is a whole nother thing. Like you think, oh, well, conditioning can be like, photos make the conditioning look a little more crazy. Like, oh, they look a little more muscled online because the photos, like you find all of these like excuses as to like why you think you're gonna fit in at that level. And I love using the like term or not term, the saying of small fish or like big fish, small pond. And then you
Yeah.
go into the nationals, like at the local level, and then you go into the national level, and suddenly you become this small fish in this massive ocean.
Yeah.
And I'm backstage and I'm looking at these girls, and I'm like, there's this girl that was like 6'6" in heels, and she was in my height class, and I was like looking at her walk past me, and I'm like, that she's in my height class. Oh my goodness. Because I'm in I'm in 5'7" and above. So like the tall girl height class I always seem to end up in
Oh,
that height class.
interesting.
Because I'm always like right at the cusp. So if I stand a little shorter, I could maybe go in the lower height class, but I I've always done well in the taller height class. Um, but anyways, I was looking around backstage and seeing all these girls and being like, I am so far off, so far.
Mm,
So I
mm.
knew immediately in prejudging, I'm like, this is not going to be good. Like
Yeah.
before I had even stepped on stage, I'm like, that's right, we'll learn. This is a learning experience, um, a hard learning experience, but still a learning experience nonetheless. I still like the one thing I was routine. I felt like I did pretty good at my routine for that, and I felt confident going on stage. So I was like, okay,
Right.
if that's only plus side of this whole experience, we'll take it. But I then saw firsthand the amount of muscle and the conditioning level I was going to have to bring. So I was like, okay, I'm
Hmm.
going to go into an improvement season and I'm going to keep growing. And I am not going to come out of this improvement season unless I know I've put on like the necessary amount of tissue to be competitive. Because I'm like, I don't want to just compete for the funsies. Like,
No.
at that point, I was like, okay, if my pro card is the goal, then we're not messing around. It's time to like take it really seriously and grow
Hmm.
on the tissue I needed. So the main thing for me was just realizing the level of competition at that level and like being really brutally honest with myself. Like, okay, you are so far from that. Like, don't even like you
Right.
pump the brakes, full pump on the brakes, and let's just go into a permit season and work your butt off and come back like undeniable. Come back undeniable. So for me, that was the biggest thing was just a big like come to Jesus moment with myself of like, you are so not ready. You're so not ready.
That's such a hard conversation to have with
Yeah.
yourself too, because when you want something so bad, you can really convince yourself that either you'll never get there or you're there. And
Yeah.
both are probably not true.
Mhm.
And you had that moment. I had that moment at USA's myself too.
You were
Um,
safe. I tell you what, she's a humbler.
I know. Well, then I got humbled at North Americans too, and I was like, well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I'm just joking, but I'm not joking. Anyway, I think many of us go through that, and it can encourage you to grow and be better, or it can discourage you, but you took it as encouraging. And obviously, you grew a lot and you
Yes.
maintained confidence on stage and even had even more confidence on stage. Um, Now, what was interesting is obviously in your in this most recent prep, your last prep, however you want to say it, you and your last coach had accomplished a lot together, and then you made the decision to switch right before your next pro qualifier, which
Yeah.
was probably, I mean, I imagine in some ways kind of risky.
Yeah. So my first show of the season was Wasatch, and at about 6 weeks out, which is terrifying to do, by the way. Stress levels went
Yeah,
straight
yeah.
up. Was like it was a very hard decision to come to,
Hmm.
but both myself and my husband were both coached by him.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so we just kept having issues, and I'm not saying this is everyone's experience. We just kept having like things that like where we weren't feeling heard. We just kept like struggling to get responses on things, and
Mm.
he had about 20 pounds. We were both prepping for the same show, and he had
Yeah.
about 20 pounds to lose, and I just kept being like, How in 6 weeks, how? Like, I'm not seeing it. He was
That was
not
you or that was your husband?
my husband.
Okay.
Like we just kept, but because we're both prepping for the same show, like like I was on track and I had started after him for prep. So like we were just trying to figure out what was going on with that and having some issues with that. Plus, to me, the biggest one was I was not no longer believing when I was told that I was on track.
Hmm.
Like for me, after stepping off stage in 21, and just kind of feeling a little gassed up into a show, just to be let down so horribly.
Mhm.
Um, and now, like looking back, I was like, okay, like I wasn't following my training anymore. Like I was holding back on macros because I was like, okay, I'm tired of pushing up so high. I had gotten
Hmm.
pushed up to 150 pounds just to then prep back under sub 120 again. I'm like, I don't want to do that anymore. And a lot of it just had to do with trust and just feeling like I just couldn't, there was no, there was no longer trust in the relationship. And when I was being told I was ready, I'm like, I no longer believe you. Because prior you told me I was ready and I was so far from ready. And now I'm like, okay, how can I trust you to tell me the truth? And so I just wanted someone who would be brutally honest with me, as I had been with myself after stepping off of the state national stage and been like, you were so far from ready. We're gonna go into improvement season and continue to work. I wanted that for myself, which is why I ended up, both my husband and I ended up swapping over to Shane Hughley. Um, and after talking to him on the phone, I was like, look, if I'm not ready for the show in 6 weeks, I'll pull. I'll happily pull out. Like I will pull out of all my shows this season, actually, if you believe I'm not ready to step on a national stage. And he was like, you're ready. Zach will not be ready. So Zach did have to pull from his show, which was really hard. Like I was continuing to prep and he had to pull because he wasn't going to be ready. So I felt really bad competing at that show, but he was still supportive of it. He was like,
Mhm.
you're going to do amazing. He's like, don't let this
Aw.
like stop you. So I was really appreciative of him for that because I was able to win the overall at Wasatch,
Yeah.
and then go on to nationals, of course. So I was happy to be able to support him when it was his turn and give him the full like show life experience and not have to have me competing at the same time as him. So he
Yeah,
only had
good
to worry about
point.
himself this season.
That's such a good point. Okay, so in that switch, what changed in your approach or in what you did to actually get ready and then win the overall and then win your pro card?
Everything, everything. I have been told for years at that point that my legs were too overpowering,
Hmm.
and that my glutes were too overpowering, and that I really hadn't been training legs for a year and a half. I hadn't trained legs like directly. Indirectly, yes. Like I had implemented a handful of exercises myself in my improvement season, but I really hadn't trained legs like exclusively, for like a year and a half, almost 2 years. So when I swapped over to Shane and I told him I hadn't been training legs, he freaked out. He was like, "What? How
Mhm.
have you not been training legs?" I'm like, I kept being told that I was too overpowering. He's like, bikini girls still need legs. So I went from training like not training legs and just like strictly glutes to training legs like 3 times a week and glutes once a week, or legs twice a week, glutes once a week.
Hmm.
So my training split changed. The intensity of my training changed massively. Like Shane's training, anyone that like is one of Shane's clients knows that his training is intense. So the first like 2 weeks, I was like, he's like, "How are you feeling with training?" I'm like, "Everything's sore. Everything's sore." I don't
Hmm.
think there's a muscle group that doesn't hurt, but I was here for it because like I was excited to finally like actually train with some serious intensity. Um,
Yeah, I bet.
and no, also like he helped me better understand like what training intensity is really like to
Hmm.
really go above and beyond in every set. Like my mentality also shifted as well because he is very much like you're gonna come in at 100, and so I need you like mentally at 100. So I was like, okay, like I'm gonna make sure that mentally I'm doing everything I can to bring my best, and like physically he'll take care of all of those things, like make sure like my whole package is good. So that changed. Diet changed as well. Initially when I swapped over to Shane, I was doing macros, and I still continued to do macros for a good chunk of time. then I actually asked to swap over to a meal plan because I was just so busy. I was working at that point still, and like mentally, I was like, I don't have time to like log everything and play macro Tetris every single night. And I was like, just tell me what to eat, tell me what to eat, and I just won't worry about it anymore. So I sent over my food logs, and he kind of built me a meal plan based off of some of the things I was still really enjoying. So like it didn't feel like I was missing out on anything at that point. And then communication was a huge one for me. And I told him right off the bat, like I want to know what the expectations are for communication right off the get-go. And he was like, if you ever have a moment of like an SOS, just text me. He's like, I will stop what I'm doing and text you back and like
Mm.
make time for you. Like if you need a phone call, I will make time for you. And that for me was huge because I didn't feel like I was being heard prior. And
Mm.
this was like, you're heard. You're like, if I need something, I'll get it resolved quickly. And I'm not having to wait 3 to 4 business days to get a
Mm.
response. So that was probably one of the bigger changes for me, just feeling like I was being heard and getting him getting back to me and making me feel like a priority.
Yeah. No, and I imagine that impacted your mentality, stress, the trust. Let's go back to your intensity in training. How do you know now versus what you thought you knew before that your training intensity is where it needs to be?
So what I felt was like intense training prior and what I know now to be intense training are like two different things. Like I thought just pushing yourself to the point where you still had a couple in the bag, maybe like a couple more in the tank, maybe I could continue pushing. And now I know what truly leaving nothing in the tank feels like.
Mm.
Uh, and for me, it wasn't so much just Shane like explaining that to me, but the way his training is structured, is basically like there's no leaving nothing on the table. So that was like probably the biggest change for me. I think that answers the question.
Yeah, no, that did. That makes sense. So now, I mean, one of the most interesting and unique parts of your story is the recent surgery and the diagnosis. So walk us through when you realized you needed to advocate to get a diagnosis and how that process looked when it started, that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
then we'll talk about what's happened since then.
Yeah. So and early on, like symptoms for this condition are vastly different. Everyone's experience with the symptoms is there's so many ends to the spectrum, which makes it really hard to diagnose. So when I initially started experiencing like symptoms of the Superior Canal Dehiscence Syndrome, I even struggle with pronouncing it. Um, when I initially started like having symptoms, it was after Wasatch. I was noticing I
Hmm.
was trying to do cardio and I was dizzy. And initially I attributed that to maybe some food issues. So, but I kept checking my blood glucose and my glucose was good. So I was like, know what this is about. And I just kept feeling like my head was really full,
Wow.
almost like a sinus infection. So I kept going to the doctor because I'm prone to sinus infections and
Hmm.
ear infection. So like I was going to the doctor getting to like see if maybe I had an ear infection or a sinus infection. And I remember even asking on my story at one point, has anyone had an allergy shot before? Because I thought it was allergy related. I was convinced it was allergy related when it first started.
Yeah.
Maybe because my ears are full, like it's causing balance issues. Like I was
Oh,
chalking it up to all sorts of things and to do with like allergies or something along the lines
right.
of like, sinus infection. Every time I go to the doctor, they'd be like, "You don't have anything, but we can give you some steroids. How about some steroid? How about a steroid shot? How about some antibiotics? Like you don't have an ear infection, but let's run a round of antibiotics." I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 wait a minute! Like you're telling me I don't actually need it, but let's just take it anyways." I'm like, I think I did the steroid shot twice just because I was desperate because I was at that point like I had a couple like pretty good like vertigo issues or um like was triggered pretty bad so I'd like have to like work through it. So I went twice, I believe, to quick care and got like a steroid shot because I thought it would help. And initially I thought it was helping, but I realized it really wasn't. It was
Hmm.
just because of my activity levels would go down after the steroid shot and I would just lay down and chill for a bit. Um, and then I would be fine. So I attributed it initially. I was like, oh, the steroid shots are working. Great, success. And then I'd go be active again and I'd go to work and end up having to go home early because I
Hmm.
would end up being like having a vertigo attack basically and was struggling to drive. So early on, I thought it was something related to that. And then I realized, okay, it's not ear infection, it's not sinus. Um, and I like the doctors did not really have a good answer for me. I remember going into my primary care doctor, which I no longer go to this primary care doctor because I was really upset after leaving the doctor's office that day. He did a couple balance tests to see if he could trigger the vertigo. And I remember him doing the couple balance tests and then me being like, okay, like, do you have any answers for me? And him being like, nope, don't have answers. What do you want to do next? And he was just so unhelpful, and just
Yeah.
did not seem to care at all that I was like struggling, continuing to struggle. I kept having to leave work early, and I was struggling to drive a little bit at that point. I'm like, I just don't know what's wrong. And I couldn't do elliptical anymore, so I was switched. Like I told Shayna, I had to swap over to treadmill incline because I just couldn't do the bouncing anymore. Like I remember
Hmm.
being on the elliptical and like my head was bouncing, and I'm like, I'm gonna fall off of this thing. Like I'm gonna fall off of this thing. I'm like, okay, no more.
Wow.
So I stopped going on an elliptical, um, begged that primary care doctor to give me a ticket basically to go to an ENT.
Yeah.
Like you're not helping, this level is not helping. All you're doing is trying to force antibiotics on me and steroid shots on me, and it's not those are not helping. Um, so finally I got like a ticket to go to an ENT and all of the NTs in our area were booked so solid. Like I remember calling when this whole thing was going down. This is like right after my show in April, and them telling me they could get me in July. I was like,
Oh, why
what?
is it like that everywhere?
I don't know. It was horrible. Like I wanted at that point I wanted to just
Yeah,
cry after walking
yours.
out and being told that and then going, I mean, I was in my car when I called and they told me July, like, and I was about ready to cry. But on the bright side, like the one positive side to that was because that ENT was so packed, I went to the secondary one. And
Mm.
it was an ENT and a physical therapist in one office together. And the ENT, she was too busy. She had a full calendar. I think they said July, August, something along the lines of that too. But the physical therapist had like an appointment the next week, and she specialized in balance issues. And so I remember going, I was the oldest person in the office. There's like all these little kids like with ear issues, and I'm like just sitting in the office. I'm like, I am so much older than everyone in this in this office, but it's fine. Went in, she did some balance testing. She went a little more in depth than just the primary care doctor. And I could tell that like she I think she had like an inkling as to what she thought it was. She's like, she's like, I'm gonna actually run and grab the ENT quick. I'm like, oh, okay. She left, she brought the ENT back, and she was like, hey, I think you need to go for a CAT scan. And I believe it's called a VNG. It's like this 3 hour long balance test where they just put you through the ringer. And basically what it does is testing every like aspect of the inner ear to narrow down where is affected. So
Hmm.
it's kind of like shrinking instead of like this whole list of things, it's like slowly, systematically shrinking it down. It was horrible. I remember getting out of that and being so dizzy because like they blew air into my ear and I felt like I was spinning in
Oh
circles. It was
no.
horrible. Um, but the cat between the CAT scan and that VNG, they were like, "Hey, we think we can't actually diagnose. They were not legally allowed to diagnose, but they said we believe you have superior canal dehiscence syndrome. Now you have to go to just an ear specialist." And again, I ran into the issue of the local one was telling me August for the first appointment, and then that wasn't even for surgery. That was just the first appointment to see them. So I was like, hey, give me another referral. I need another referral. They finally referred me to Iowa State University. It's like a teaching college and a hospital, or te teaching hospital, sorry. And they referred me there to Dr. Hansen, Dr. Marlon Hansen. He is a specialist and a leader in the field. So like I felt really confident. I was like watching YouTube videos of him talking on different topics, and he's massive in the advancements of like cochlear implants and stuff like that. And
Oh,
so I'm like,
wow, that's
so
great.
like I felt really confident going in to see him. And when I finally got in to see him, he like saw my scans and he was like, "There's no doubt, no
Hmm.
doubt." It was just in my right ear, not both ears. Thank goodness. It's incredibly rare. Like I want to say 1 to 2% of the population have it, and even less have it in both ears.
Wow.
The really, really unlucky people have it in both ears, and I feel really bad for the ones that do because like some people will struggle for years and years just to get diagnosed.
Mm,
And it's like I wouldn't wish this on anybody.
no.
So yeah, we finally got in to see him, and he set my surgery date of August 16th. So as August 16th was surgery. So
Peace with food without sacrificing your goals as a competitor because you deserve to have successful preps, productive improvement seasons, and peace of mind year round. I decided to create a free 8-day food relationship coaching series a few years back that over 800 over 800 people have gone through. Because when your head is cluttered with thoughts of food, eating, guilt, you have a lot less energy to invest into the goals that you truly care about. So, this free program was designed to help athletes like yourself develop a healthy relationship with food so you can have your most fulfilling and effective preps, improvement seasons, and lifestyle phases as well. This is an 8-day series that has a video every single day, a full workbook to guide you through every single video, and you can respond to the emails with the work you did and receive direct support and guidance from me personally, which is, of course, something I love to provide to the community. So you're not only going to discover your ideal relationship with food, but you'll also identify detrimental thought and behavior patterns. You'll overcome guilt and shame. So every decision can be made with intention and pride. We will use expectations and reinforcements to seamlessly manipulate your behavior around food to be more positive and aligned with that ideal relationship with food. We'll figure out why you're really craving what you are when you're sleep deep in another jar of peanut butter or justifying that next cookie or continuously eating endless bags of rice cakes, whatever it is for you. We'll become crystal clear on why you act, think, and live the way you do, so you can, of course, act, think, and live the way you want to. And we'll come up with some personal commitments that are rooted in positive psychology based on your current season. So, this is a psychoeducational course. It is free to anyone and everyone. You can access it at www.celestial.fit/food series and learn more about it, as well as even get a sneak peek into the accessible PDF notebook with the extra resources and guidance through every single workshop along the way. If you do decide to participate in it and you love it, of course, I encourage you to share it with a friend or a teammate or another athlete who may be struggling. Or if you hear about someone's struggle, let them know that this exists. And how long after your show was that?
I want to say so. Universe was July 5th,
Mm,
August 16th.
yeah.
So not a super long period of time.
How
Um,
did you how did you approach post show knowing you were going to be going into surgery, which I don't even know what the recovery looks like for that. So I'm curious like how that affected training, nutrition.
Yeah, so I continued to push like post show. Like I had, they told me there was no reason to stop moving.
Yeah.
Dr. Hansen actually was like, move as much as you can. He's like, it's not going to hurt you. You've already been doing it this long. I explained to him in depth what I did, like that I was competing to see if I could even continue at that point because I was worried that I was going to have to pull from everything. And everyone around me was like, you need to stop. You need to stop. You need to stop.
Mm.
Um, and when I came out of show, I like first off, I was updating Shane always about like, hey, I'm going in for this appointment and they told me this, and I'm going in for this appointment and they told me this, and like just keeping him up to date on everything happening. So when I did finally get a surgery date, I let him know and I was like, hey, we need to be reversed. I need some healthy fat on my body to help with recovery. Like if I'm this lean going into surgery, I knew that coming out of surgery was going to be rough. It was going to be really rough.
Mhm.
So immediately post show, like I enjoyed a few days in New York with my friend Kimberly, and we had some fun. We ate some food, and then as soon as I got back on Monday, we just started upping
Good.
calories, and just I was still struggling at that point, just wrapping my head around the whole situation, and definitely had some off track days,
Mhm.
good chunk of time off track. But we put on some body fat. We didn't go crazy. We just reversed up as best we could with the time that we had and went into surgery when I'm glad we put on the amount of weight we did because I lost 12 pounds after surgery, like with all in. Yeah.
Why?
So it was my surgery was on Friday. And so I went
Mhm.
in Friday. Well, of course, the whole day you spend not eating.
Mhm.
And then when they wouldn't allow me to eat when I woke up that night, I for or not night, it was like that late afternoon when I woke up, but don't think I was allowed to eat until maybe like the next morning, I want to say. But honestly, I wasn't hungry. I was really nauseous and really, really out of
Oh,
it. They had to keep me on really light painkillers because it is a cranial surgery. They want to continue to check your mental status and make sure like they haven't messed up your head any. So like they kept having to come into the room like every hour and being like, "Do you remember your name? Do you know what year it is? Do you know what the president is? Can you squeeze my hands? Move your toes, move your shoulders, wiggle your eyes." Like all sorts of things that they would come in and check on. Finally, day two, they gave me some actual painkillers. It was horrible. Like I also had to lay like seated up, because you
yeah.
couldn't didn't want to put pressure on the head cavity at all.
Oh, wow.
So you had to lay like seated up, and I think that was part of like the worst part. When you go from being so active to suddenly just being sedentary for so long, your body just hurts so bad, so bad.
Yeah.
And they also have like a compression bandage that goes around your head, and like it just squeezes, and you just feel like you have a horrible headache all the time.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And when so part of the surgery is so what's responsible for chewing goes here, like the muscle goes here, and they have to move that and or cut that when you go in for surgery. So when I woke up,
Whoa.
it was like having lockjaw. So I was like, try remember, I didn't think about it. I ordered breakfast tacos off the menu, and I'm trying to sit there and eat breakfast tacos. I'm like, trying to
Yeah.
eat tacos like this. And you wake up, and because they are like operating around the area and in the area that's responsible for balance, you wake up so dizzy. Like he's like, don't panic, you're gonna wake up so on the opposite side, like 10,000 times worse than when you went under. So you're freaking out when you wake up. You're like, oh my God, like just doing this makes you feel like you're gonna vomit from being so dizzy.
Uh,
Um, so it was just hard to eat anything initially. I think I latched on to SpaghettiOs. It was like the one thing I could eat and keep down.
and get
And
some calories in at least.
yeah, yeah. So like oatmeal and SpaghettiOs and
Oh
yogurt. Like
man.
it was not a fun experience. And you spend like 2 days in intensive care and then 2 days in just the standard floor, or a day and a
Mhm.
half in the standard floor. I think that was approximately it. So I lost a lot of weight just based on not being able to like I went from eating a good amount of calories
Exactly.
and protein and carbs and all of the lovely foods that we eat. And I went from that to eating like 1, 2 meals a day just because I was so, so nauseous when I woke up.
Whoa. So, how did that experience impact your view on life and your lifestyle and the power of being fit and healthy?
So throughout the whole process of like being diagnosed, um, I was a very like independent person. Um, very much like I love having my independence and being able to
Mhm.
do all the things myself. I'm like, if I can do it myself, I'm going to take care of it. Like, I don't want to ask another person for help if I don't need it. Um, and first off, I was told after I got diagnosed, like the week after I got diagnosed, they told me you should no longer be driving. So I got that removed. I got that pulled. Because I couldn't drive, I then had to step back at work. So I went from being super active at work and going out of the house every day to being super at home all the time. Um,
Yeah.
so that got taken away from me in this process. Um, so by the time I woke up from surgery and I was like, okay, your body gets so adapted to having the hole because there's a hole in that area. You now have to retrain everything. So I had to relearn how to walk again for balance. So in the hospital, like I kept being like, okay, let's go for another walk. As soon as I could get out of the hospital, I'm like, let's go for another walk. Let's go for another walk. And we started with just like one lap around the hospital or like my little floor area and then another lap. And I just kept building on that. But the biggest thing it like taught me was not to take things for granted. Like
Wow,
I
yeah.
used to take for granted going to work every day, driving anywhere that I needed to go, um, being able to walk and not be dizzy and like movement. One of the things that triggered vertigo attacks was noise, and I was going to the gym with my headphones on and wondering why I felt so horrible. And then I
Hmm.
realized if there's loud noises going in that ear, it causes the sound to leak into the skull, which causes vertigo issues. So I was going to the gym with an earplug in the ear and headphones. And I stepped on stage at Universe and Junior Nats with an earplug in to
Wow.
prevent like vertigo from happening on stage. Like, so the good news is it was this ear towards the back, so you couldn't see it. My hair was like, I'm like, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Nobody needs to know. Um, so you take all these things for granted, like listening to music in both ears. Like
Yeah.
the first time post surgery that I put a headphone in that ear and I was able to listen to music
Uh-huh.
and not feel dizzy. I was like
Oh,
on
wow.
the
What a
treadmill at the gym.
relief.
I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna cry.
I
I was so
bet.
excited just to be able to like listen to music because I'm a huge
Wow.
music fan. Um, and like just having everything just systematically removed and taken away from you, suddenly you're like, okay, now I get to go to work. I don't have to go to work. I get to go to work. I'm excited. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter if it's a good day or a bad day. I get to go to work. I get to drive myself places. I get to move my body and move it and not feel dizzy because now I can jog up and down the stairs and not like be like, whoa,
Yeah.
the world's moving around me. So I just get super, super excited about movement and just being able to do all these things that like for 5 months, over 5 months that I wasn't able to do. So it makes you appreciate all of like those little things again. Yeah.
Gosh, hearing this story, it's like you can't really, I don't think you can really vocalize or conceptualize that without going through it, um, or even grasp it. Because hearing you talk about it, I imagine there's so many things that happened that even you will listen back to this and be like, oh, well, there was also this, there was also this. So there's all these little things like we don't get to see or hear about, but that we can assume based off of what you've shared. And one that stood out to me was relearning how to walk. You're a posing coach, you're an IFBB pro, you wear heels all the time. Most of us don't even, like, most of us have to learn how to walk in heels, but to relearn how to walk. And then I know you've been posting updates on like, your heels and your posing journey too. So how has it influenced walking in heels?
So I remember the first time post surgery when I put my heels back on, I still was like restricted. I couldn't lift at that point. So I had just gone and done my hour of cardio that I was so excited to do. I'm like,
I
I've never been
bet.
so happy to do an hour of cardio. Um, I remember going upstairs in my gym's posing room and I put my heels on. I'm like, okay, whatever happens is fine. This is
Yeah.
just the first time. Like it's gonna take time. It's gonna take time. And I remember just walk like I was trying to like walk normally in my heels, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Whoa, okay, we can't do that." So I just plopped myself in my like front pose. I'm like, "Okay, we're just gonna go through this real slow. We're gonna keep the head
Wow.
real still, and it'll be fine." And trying to go through my poses, and I kept just falling out of it. Like you'd go and barely turn and I would oof, just out of it. Um, but now, like, other than like a hair flip, I'm good. Like, I'm good.
That's great.
But I did, like, I was worried how it would be impacted, but I used the analogy of moving the pin forward every day.
Mm.
And I attribute my recovery being so fast to continuing to push the body forward. And even if you have a day where you felt like you were taking a step back in progress, which I definitely had that
Yeah.
at points in time, I didn't let that one bad day prevent me from continuing to move forward. So as soon as I could get up and get moving after surgery, I was like, okay, I don't care if it makes me dizzy. The only way to fix it is to force the brain to fix it. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be dizzy. I'm gonna hold on to my people, and they'll make sure I won't fall. Like they'll make sure I won't fall,
Right.
and we'll just keep moving. And then as soon as I got home and could start moving again, and as soon as I could get myself down the stairs to my basement,
Mm.
I was on my treadmill, holding on to both sides
I
at like
bet.
one speed, and essentially making myself dizzy to fix it. So I
Hmm.
kept just looking left, looking right, looking left, looking right, looking up, looking down, because like all these little things that you think, oh, you can just do. Like I couldn't look back and forth. I couldn't look
Yeah.
back and forth. As soon as I tipped my head up, I thought I was gonna fall over backwards. So you just had to like force the dizziness and force the feeling of like maybe I'm gonna fall, but holding on to things to make sure I don't fall to fix it. And just continuing to push the pin forward every single day. And I'm like, I saw my progress every single day. Like I went from not being able to walk down the block. When my mom stayed with us for probably about a week after surgery just to help. And we would go outside to get out of the house. And she, like, I remember the start of the week, I'd have to hold on to her for like dear life. And we could only walk like two driveways down. I remember two driveways down. And I remember by the end of the week, I was like just hovering my hand over her arm to like make sure just in case that she was still there. Like if I needed to
Mhm.
grab her, I could still grab her. And we were walking like five driveways down and back and just like taking those little steps, micro steps forward and like, okay, every little day is like a step forward. You just got to
Wow.
keep working towards it.
Did you experience any anxiety with getting back into lifting or doing these things? Because sometimes when there's injury or intervention like this, athletes will experience some concern or anxiety based on like past experiences. So, did you experience that?
Not so much after surgery. I was, of course, nervous to like mess up everything that I just gone through and like potentially have to
Mhm.
go back in again. So I was like cautious about
Yeah.
getting back into things and sticking to the weight limit that he had said. Like I think it was like 5 pounds, 10 pounds, something like that. That was like my cap. Um, but I knew that the only way to get better was just to continue to move. Um, so as far as like anxiety after the fact, no, I was just so happy to be on the other side of it. Definitely prior. Like I remember I was diagnosed, it's horrible. I was diagnosed while I was away at a work trip in the middle of the week on Wednesday. I was in New York for work and it was like in the middle of the day and I was with my coworker and I got the call and like I was like, oh, it's the doctor's office. He knew like my work coworkers and my boss all knew that I've been waiting to figure out what's been going on. Um, and I just got really quiet and he was like, what is it? And I told him, I'm like, I don't really know what this means because at that point I'd never heard of it.
Yeah.
Um, and so I just kind of tabled it for the day. But I remember getting back to my room that night and doing exactly what you shouldn't do. I Googled it.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
oh, and I Googled it alone in my hotel room, away from my whole support system.
Mhm.
And like the reality of it just came like crashing down at that point. And it was horrible. Like I called my husband in like a full panic attack because I saw what the surgery Google images did me dirty.
Yeah.
I saw what the images of the surgery and like this massive scars on the sides of people's heads, and I was like, oh my God, like that I'm gonna have to get cranial. It like sunk in at that point that I was gonna have to get cranial surgery, and I had the only like surgery I'd had at this point was removal. So very minor. Like I hadn't broken any, or I'd broken a couple bones, but they were like toes, nothing crazy.
Mhm.
So to go from never being really truly like put under for any period of time or kept in the hospital to being told that you're gonna have to go have cranial surgery, I struggled so hard to mentally wrap my brain around that
Of
without
course.
like having panic attacks. And there was plenty of times I feel super bad for my husband, but thank
Mm.
goodness for him because he would come home. He'd be talking to me throughout the day, texting, and something would trigger me, and he would come home and I'd be in a mess on the bathroom floor, and he'd be like, "What happened? Like, what happened?" And I'm thankful for my female corgi. Don't know what it is, but she was made. She should have been a service animal. 100% should have been a service animal. Because he was like the first time it happened, he was like, I don't know what to do. He's like, I don't know what to do to make this better. And so he just let
Um,
the dogs go, and it was like she came up to me and just kept like grounding me and like pulling me out of it, and like she kept like licking my hand and like forcing me to pet her. And I'm like, initially I
oh,
was a little annoyed, but then I was like, no, this is helping. Like this is helping. I went from like I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe to like
wow.
being able to breathe and like, okay, thank goodness, because it
Oh,
was a lot. And especially after I got diagnosed, like everyone in my life was like, could not understand why it was happening. Uh,
right.
the one thing about this condition is they can't prove that it's genetic. They can't prove that you were born with it. They can't prove that there's like external factors that cause it. It does happen more in females, but they don't, other than that, like they don't understand what causes it.
Mm.
So everyone in my life was just trying to get me to stop prepping at that point because it was after Wasatch and I was working towards junior nats at that point.
Yeah.
And they were tell I got hounded initially because I was sharing so much because I thought it was allergies and I thought it was simple. So I did end up sharing what it was on my story and on Instagram. And I started getting hounded with like messages of too much sodium, too little sodium, too much water, too little water. I got kicked by a horse when I was like 15 because I used to ride competitively. I remember my dad calling me, be like, "What side of the head did you get kicked on again?" He meant it in like a very like nice way, but like everyone around me was trying to figure out what
Why?
caused it and
Yeah.
why. And so just being like hounded by that, plus friends and family being like, "Hey, you should stop prepping." Like, I don't think it's helping. But in reality, like when I had to stop at work and could no longer drive myself, it was like the one thing that was keeping me mentally in a good place. It was like it was honestly saving me during that time because I was like, I'd never had like severe mental health issues until that point, and I was like, without this, without the competing, like, we would have been way worse.
Mm.
Yeah, it was not good. Never had I been so like concerned to the point where I was like, okay, I need to call my parents because I need some support at home. Um, so having to call your mom and be like, hey, I'm worried enough that I feel like I need somebody at the house. Because my husband was working Monday to Friday and I'd be home all alone and when you close yourself in like that, it gets really bad. So
Yeah.
it was bad.
Oh man, it sounds terrible. And that's so scary when you've never experienced that. It's scary enough if you have, but then
Yeah.
to never experience that and all of a sudden you're like, this is happening, and then these thoughts are following it. And I don't know what's going to happen to me. I don't know what my life's going to look like. It can feel really hopeless.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I'd never been you'd have everyone has like bad mental health days, but I'd never been to the point where I'm like, okay, this is concerning. Like this is concerning. And I definitely can thank bodybuilding for saving me this season because
Mhm.
without continuing to prep and without like my husband believing in me, I was like, everyone around you is trying to get you to stop. And I'm like, I know my body. I know my body. I know I'm okay. The doctors have told me that I'm okay. Um, he was like the one person that was like, do you think you can do it? And I was like, I think I can do it. He was like, if you think you can do it and you can put your mind to it, like I'm here to support you in any way that we can.
Oh,
Um, so incredibly thankful for that man because he was my rock throughout all of this. And he is a high stress person, and I definitely multiple times sent his stress levels a little bit high. Um, when I went to my doctors, I didn't think I could fly. And when I
mhm.
went to my doctors to ask if I could fly for, like out to go to Universe, he was super stressed. He was like, because he wasn't going to be able to go with me. And he was like worried that me going by myself to Universe was going to be dangerous in some way. So like he was super nervous about that. I definitely sent his stress levels a little high. But we made it, and my friend Kimberly helped me while I was there. And like honestly, so thankful for her too, because I wouldn't have been able to do Universe if it wasn't for her being
Wow.
there and being able to like help me as well.
Wow. That's amazing. And was it the doctors who recommended you wear a earplug?
When I was looking, so the one of the first things I did after like getting diagnosed and like trying to wrap my brain around it, my sister had encouraged me. She said, there's probably a support group somewhere. And so I went to Facebook and I found a support group of people that just have this condition. And I was looking into like what they were doing. And the best thing about it is because you could post on there and like people would
Mm.
respond pretty actively. Um, and people were posting about using earplugs. And I was like, okay, like done. Say less, say less. I will happily order earplugs. So I ordered the loop earplugs that were like
Mhm.
sound adjustable.
Hmm.
So you could kind of like slightly dampen sound or completely block out the sound. And I loved them. They were great. They helped
Wow.
so much. I was using those at the gym and I was using those like if I'd go grocery shopping. I wouldn't turn them completely like to sound canceling when I was going grocery shopping because I wanted to hear what was going on around me. But it definitely helped with like not hearing like if a cart crashed against each other and feeling like you're gonna fall on your face, fall on your face because the noise was just so jarring.
Hmm.
Yeah.
How was that at the show? Like, not being able to, like, could you hear, because you have to turn it down for the music, but then could you hear the cues from the judges?
Yeah, so the nice thing was it might it was my right ear, it is my right ear. And because my posing side is my left side, so my left ear was towards the front. And of course, they're loud enough to hear. So I didn't have any issues. I was a little worried. And that's another thing where like breathing work, breath work came into play. I ended up finding that the steadier I could keep my heart rate, because when vertigo attacks got really bad, like your eyes would bounce to your heart rate. So that
Wow.
would cause, I don't know, it's a really weird condition. Like you can hear your eyelids peel apart. It was the strangest thing to explain to
Hmm.
people. Like talking could ring off your eardrum and cause it. Um, so what I found was with the earplug on stage and being mindful while I was backstage on not like um if I was trying to stay in quieter areas,
Yeah.
um, and let people know around me that hey, like if I'm not talking, it's not because I'm not social and not friendly. I'm just trying to like keep myself in a place where where I'm not dizzy and where I'm not like causing vertigo. And so I
Hmm.
had it with me at all times backstage. I was like, if I needed to put it in, I'd put it in quick. And it's pretty quick. I was pretty quick like to tell like when the sound had gone to like a level where I needed it. And I would put it in at that point. And
Wow.
Backstage Universe was pretty loud.
Yeah, it's no joke backstage or even going to shows at all. And first of all, thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing everything you experienced all the way down to the darkest points. I'm so glad you had family nearby to support you and also that your husband was so encouraging because especially if he's a high stress person, I could see it being like, I want to support you, but also like I'm really stressed about this. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
great. And you followed through and obviously it didn't just save your life, but you did win your pro card at the end of the day. Like at the end of the season, you got it. And that's incredible. And what a testimony to your perseverance and to your journey. And did it feel, I imagine, well, I guess I can't even ask you in that way because with something so new of a diagnosis, the feeling of getting your pro card, I imagine, was maybe deeper because of all that you endured. Would you say that's true?
Definitely. Like at the beginning, like at the middle of the season, not beginning of the season, the middle of the season after all of that, I didn't even think I was going to be able to continue to do shows. So I kind of,
Mm.
my plan for the season was three shows, one regional, two nationals. And mid-season, it felt like that was about to be taken away from me. And I was like, okay, I don't think I'm even going to be able to do this. So by the time I stepped on stage at Universe, because I got second at Junior Nats, I was like, as long as I don't place worse, we're okay. But honestly, going into that show was just like, whatever happens, happens. At this point, I didn't get a show taken away from me. I don't feel like anything's been taken from me at this point. Like I'm now getting to do both
Wow.
national shows like I had planned. Like if I get it, it's that cherry on top.
Mm.
It's amazing. Like it's the goal for the whole season. But if I don't get it, I still put in all the effort that I would have had I not had this massive thing happen. So I was
Wow.
like, no matter what happens, like I'm happy. It was the chillest peak week, that smoothest peak week, the most calm I had ever been on stage. Like I got on stage and like there was zero jitters. I hardly had to do any breath work backstage before I stepped on. I was just like pump up and go and
Wow.
just show them everything and leave it all on the stage. And I was like, this is my last time this season. Not last time ever. I was like, this will not be my last time ever. This is just my last time this season. And
Wow.
it was an amazing experience. And to like be rewarded with the pro card after everything, I was like, I don't care. All the stuff that I just went through, this was worth it. I'm like, this just made me that much better of an athlete. To be able to push through all of that and still get on stage and get my pro card, I was like, you've learned what hard is. Like you've learned what hard is. Like if you can do this with everything, if you can complete a prep with that, you can do anything. Like no problems. Next prep, I don't care how tired I am. Like I don't like there's like it shows you what hard really is. Like what
Mm.
difficult really is. I'm like, okay, it doesn't matter what happens. I'm leaving this season happy. And
Wow.
we left with the goal, and that was awesome. But it didn't change my like feelings or like impact after show because I was like, doesn't matter. I'm still going into improvement season. I'm still going and like prepping for surgery. So there's no change for my post show pro card or not.
That's amazing. And definitely a different outlook than the Carly who saw someone eating chicken and almonds thinking that's dedication. You want
Yeah.
to talk about dedication?
Oh my goodness, yes. Yeah. I like think back because had you told her in that moment that she would be here right now, like having done everything that I've done, would not believe you. Would not believe you. Would not believe you that I got my pro card. Would not believe you that I had stepped on stage at that point. Like, would not have believed you at all. Would not believe like that I'm this confident. Like, I'm definitely thankful. Like, I remember that first time I stepped on stage and wanting that person to be my everyday, and I'm like, I'm getting more and more close to that every single day, and I'm thankful for that. I'm really thankful for
Beautiful. What do you hope to accomplish now that you did achieve the goal?
that. Working towards our pro debut, and I'm really, really excited for that. It doesn't matter what happens. Like everyone, we climb so hard to get to the top of
Yeah.
the NPC ladder just to get kicked off and go right back down to the bottom. So I'm
Right.
like, you know what? I want to go and compete on a pro stage when Shane says we're ready, and just enjoy it, and soak it in, and like
Right.
live in it. Just live and enjoy it. That's what I want.
Seriously. So, in reference to your last show where you earned your pro card, what was the feedback that you got and what are you working on? I mean, I know you're still in recovery mode, but like what's the goal that you're working towards for that pro debut?
So for the first time in my competing career, I got needs more glutes. I'm like, done, done. I,
Nice.
I'm like, I have always been able to like train my glutes crazy hard till failure, no problem. Upper body, on the other hand, I was a little baby. I used to be a little baby when it came to training
That's
shoulders.
so funny. I'm the opposite. I don't need bigger legs, but also I'm like, wow, I do not even like training lower body as much as I like upper. So I'm like vice versa or flipped of
Yeah.
yours.
Yeah. No, and like I love training with someone that loves to train upper body really hard. I'm like, I'll help you. I'll push you on the body. If you push me on the upper body,
Exactly.
I'll trade you. I'll trade you some. So yeah, I'm like, whenever someone compliments me on my glutes, I'm like, oh, thank you. Someone compliments me on my shoulder, I'm like, oh my God, thank you.
Are seeing the
Because you
real
work so
me.
hard to get them.
Yeah.
Forever, my feedback was needs more shoulders. Like this
Hmm.
season was the first season I did not get needs more shoulders, and I was like, success.
That's so
But
awesome.
Shane did say that like just growth overall. So we're just
Mhm.
honestly working on putting on tissue overall. More glutes, yes. More shoulders, yes. A little bit everywhere. Basically just feedback was just to grow, which I'm happy to. More than happy to.
That's great. So, given everything you've shared and talked about, I mean, you've left us with a lot to think about, a lot of perspective, which I appreciate a lot. What would be your best advice for someone who has never competed before but wants to? And then your best advice for somebody who is on their road to pro?
My best advice for someone who's like prepping, getting ready to prep for the first time or
Hmm.
step on stage for the first time would be don't compare your like year one, day one to someone's year five. Because like comparison is the theft, like thief of joy. And
Mm.
I understand that this sport is very much a comparison sport, but comparing yourself to someone and trying to be someone who's been in the sport for so much longer and like expecting that look on your first time stepping on stage, you're going to automatically be disappointed. And it's really sad to see. Like, work really hard, be your best. Don't compare your best on that day to someone who's been competing for years. That's not fair to yourself.
Right.
Um, yes, it's comparison. At the end of the day, the sport is comparison. The name of the game is comparison. But you don't have to be disappointed in your look just because you don't look like somebody else who's been competing longer. Every top level pro was once in your shoes. Every top level national athlete was once in your shoes. Like we all start somewhere. Just start and focus on staying in your lane and not trying to compare yourself to someone who's been in it for who knows how long. That's my biggest
Great
advice for
advice.
someone who is just getting into the sport because that can just take away all the happiness that the sport has to give you. And someone on the road to pro. Some like this is something that I wish I had been told when I was getting into like working towards my pro card. Um, think about everything when it comes to competing as a puzzle piece, like one big puzzle. If you don't focus on all the pieces and you leave out pieces, so say your physique is amazing, amazing. You've got the right muscle maturity, you've got the right tissue, you've got a great structure, but you lack on posing, you lack on the tan. You lack on maybe you're trying to cut corners on makeup or suit or hair, whatever it is. It's like taking this full puzzle piece and just taking the whole middle out of it. If you allow one area to lack, all of the areas lack, especially when it comes to like really competitive, like national level shows.
Mhm.
You have to have all the puzzle pieces in place in order to see the full picture come to fruition. And for me, this season was massively like learning, learning that and realizing that if my suit doesn't fit properly, then I will look different on stage. I won't look as good. If my makeup is lacking, if my hair is lacking, like I'd never had a really good tan until this year. But I also hadn't worked as hard at it. This is the first year that I was like, okay, we're gonna put a ton of effort in this. And I finally, by the last show of the season, didn't have a ton of problems.
Mhm.
But had I just allowed the tan to roll, like my very first show this year would not have gotten the outcome without without the like getting to the correct style of like level of tan. Uh,
Yeah.
so that probably would be my biggest advice is just you have to be the full completed puzzle. You can't
Mhm.
keep taking pieces out and expect the result. Like if you want the pro card, you have to put in effort in all areas and make sure the whole puzzle comes together.
Such great advice. I can look back at every show I've done and be like, that piece was missing, that piece was missing, that one was pretty spot on, but then this happened. So like I can see that. I
Yeah.
think that's really valuable advice for any competitor, not
Oh yeah.
just like
At any level,
yeah,
at any level.
so
Um,
good.
but especially important if you're trying to compete for that pro card because
Especially.
like if all the pieces aren't together, like you're that could be like a bad tan at a national level could be the difference between first call outs and second call outs.
Yeah, it's an easy process of elimination at that point for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, how can people work with you, connect with you, follow your journey?
So I don't have a ton of social media. I just have my Instagram, which is CARLY IFBB Pro. Very simple. I keep it very simple.
Yes.
I just have that Instagram and my business page, which is Center Stage Posing, which is Center STG Posing. But if you find one, you'll find both. They're both linked together. I do have a YouTube in the works, but it's still not really all that put together, so we won't link
Awesome.
that here yet.
Yeah. That's awesome though. But hey, people can follow you and then they'll get those updates. I appreciate you so much for coming on and sharing your journey, your story, and who you are, and giving us such good insight, wisdom, and perspective again.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're so welcome. And we're going to put all of your information as well as the show notes on celestial.fit/podcast. So for those of you listening, if you want to connect with us online, you can find the links there, but you won't only find the links, you'll also find a full episode summary, a bulleted list of the topics we covered, and episode timestamps. So you can send this to your friends, your family, let them know what parts resonated the most, or go back and listen to your favorite parts. Of course, myself and the athletes always appreciate when you post online, you let us know you listen, share your favorite parts, your takeaways, or just that you tuned in, or you send them a message. It goes such a long way. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to talk to you guys, especially because people like CARLY who have been listening since, I mean, for years now. It's like at that point now where I'm like, some of y'all listening, I'll be talking to you very soon, which is so exciting. So if you feel inspired to leave a rating or a review, that would mean so much. And with all of that being said, I hope that you all have an amazing rest of your day, night, or morning, wherever you're in the world while you're listening to this episode. Just make it awesome.